Okay, today is January 6, 1975, and I'm interviewing Mr. Jacob Trobe, Trobe, in Manhattan. First of all, I think we should state for the record with what organization we are affiliated with.
I'm Jacob L. Trobe, currently the Executive Vice President of the Jewish Child Care Association of New York at 345 Madison Avenue, New York, New York, 10017. I am granting this interview in trying to see if I can contribute to an important project in oral history, dealing essentially with my experience as the director for the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee principally in Italy, Germany, Tripolitania, now Libya, and shorter stints in Turkey and in Egypt and Luxembourg. The period of my European and Middle Eastern service spanned from December 1944, correct, this is a correction. It spanned from December 1944 with arrival in London until departure from Italy in April 1948. Prior to the November 44 experience, I was trained by the JDC at a special month-long intensive course at the School of International Affairs of Columbia University in the city of New York. And I then was subsequently recruited by JDC and went into the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration Training Center for a couple months at the University of Maryland at College Park. Subsequent to that, I went into the international Washington, D.C. headquarters of UNRWA and wrote manuals of public welfare. Basically, my most active period of work with the survivors of the Holocaust were in Germany and Italy, a span of some 4 years plus.
Fine. Now, we talked on the phone about how Rabbi Judah Nadich became advisor, or Jewish advisor to General Eisenhower.
Well, you will recall that when you called me, you told me that your historical work was going to be devoted essentially to, as I understood it, the service of chaplains as they had an impact on the relief and assistance generally to post-World War II Jewish refugees.
Right.
I told you then, as I tell you this morning, that we're talking about a period close to 30 years ago, and memory may not serve me well on individual contacts with chaplains, and more importantly, within the first couple weeks after I arrived in Germany, Dr. Joseph J. Schwartz, the then European director for the JDC, grasped the mammoth nature of the job to be done in Germany, and he quickly appointed me to be director of the entire mission. And I had to import very rapidly many Americans and recruit many Europeans. to work, and they, being essentially the line workers, would have had the most intimate, most direct contact with the chaplains. I'll tell the little story about the appointment of my friend Rabbi Judah Nadich, as I recall it, subject to verification by the rabbi.
Okay.
One day, probably in late August or early September, I was advised by Charles Shotland, a colonel in the U.S. Armed Services who was in charge at the SHAEF headquarters, that's the SAP's Supreme Allied Expeditionary Forces headquarters, in Frankfurt under General Eisenhower. Colonel Shotland was in charge of refugee work, that is the Army's refugee work. He was the chief ranking officer on refugee work under General Michelson. I believe that General Michelson's responsibilities went beyond the refugee work, but if they didn't, he of course would outrank Shotland. But Shotland had the real job of day-to-day work and how the U.S. Army addressed itself to the survivors of the Nazi experience. He came to me this one day in what I guess is early September, and he said, "You know, Jake, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the United States on President Truman to name an advisor to General Eisenhower on Jewish affairs. Jewish leaders in the United States are very upset about what they perceive to be the inadequate care of the Jewish survivors of the Holocaust finding themselves in the DP camps in the military zones of Germany." I think the appointment related exclusively to the American zone, as I remember it, but that would have to be verified. I was told by Colonel Shotland that a rabbi who I did not know, whose name I believe was Marcus, and who I think has since died, I was told that there was a great deal of push at the American end of whoever was talking to the president. If I recall it, the principal spokesman with the president was the late Rabbi Stephen S. Wise.
And that would have fit in very well, because Marcus is a member of the American Jewish Congress.
Yes, I had heard he was active in American Jewish Congress. I had learned from Shotland, I believe, and perhaps one or two other sources, secondhand information, only hearsay, that Marcus would be a poor appointment because of the nature of his advocacy was abrasive, and it was the judgment of the several people that came to me that there was much to be done and could be done effectively with the U.S. Army to make sure that there's good and adequate treatment for the Jewish refugees, that would not be done well if we really got up the back of the leadership in the SHAEF headquarters, or in General Eisenhower's headquarters. My own assessment was that whatever lack of adequate service there was in the first weeks after liberation was really not due to a callousness or a lack of interest on the part of the high-level leaders of the military command in Germany, but were basically a product of finding a situation which they weren't fully prepared for. Also having a terrific yen among the soldiers to go home. The war was over. They were there for a shooting war. As I recall at Stars and Stripes, the Army newspaper was full of stories of when they're going home, etc. Some of these camps were quite large. As I remember, some may have had 10, 12,000 people in them, some less. But whatever their size, they represented an assignment as though you were told, tomorrow go in and be the mayor of the village, without having lived in the village, without having training for it through lower echelon political posts. Some of these soldiers assigned to this task did incredibly well. Others just couldn't wait till they got home. Now, I found chaplains on the scene when I came into Germany, but the first chaplain I met, not the first chaplain I met, but let's get back to Judah Nadish. This is a rambling account. When I was told this story by Colonel Shotland, he said to me, Jake, if you got any other idea, you'll have to come up with it within a half hour or an hour. I don't recall the time span. And if you do, I will send that name up to General Eisenhower, and then it will be cabled to the United States, to the office of the President. And that's, if you want to head off Marcus, that's the way it's to be done. I said, all right. I was chief for Germany for JDC, but after all, this was a very important policy matter. I tried to reach our European headquarters, and in the early period after the war, the telephone service wasn't so great between Frankfurt and Paris, and I tried, I couldn't get through, and time was running out on me. And I recalled, by good fortune, that the preceding weekend I had been to Paris for a conference with Dr. Schwartz, and we conferred at all hours, very often till 2 o'clock in the morning, and on that preceding weekend, after we had worked a good deal, late Saturday night, we had a little get-together of members of the staff of the JDC, and there may have been some other Jews and the armed services with us as friends of JDC. I don't recall, but I did recall meeting there a Rabbi Judah Nadish, who had been, I believe, the chief chaplain for the European Theater of the American Army, first posted in Great Britain, now apparently, I believe, assigned to Paris. I'm not sure that he was assigned or he's just on vacation. That has to be verified. And we were young, and we enjoyed ourselves in our discussion and our vigor, and after a great deal of hard work, and we sang, and I remember singing Gilbert and Sullivan. I think it was probably Trial by Jury, and I remembered this, and I remembered when I had to get a message up to Shotland to go up to General Eisenhower to go to the President of the United States, and this looked like a very sensible fellow, intelligent, responsible, and well-mannered, and I decided, since it had, I should say it had to be a chaplain, because the President did want to name a broad-gauge layman, and he wanted a chaplain named temporarily because a chaplain could be given the orders for the assignment and the orders could be changed. So he'd have no problem. If he made a hasty decision, he might make the wrong lay decision. It would be more difficult to change. So happened in due course, not too many months later, in came Judge Rifkin. I think Judah Nadish served in that post probably about 3 months. I kind of remember meeting Judge Rifkin early December or late November, because I had a good deal to do with him during the short period that I remained in Germany, which was to January the 9th, 1946, before I took off the United States and came back to Italy. Now I shall finish the Judah Nadish story, just as Charles Shotland told me. Apparently the message went from Charles Shotland to upstairs in the Schaef headquarters, which was the E.G. Farben Industry building of Frankfurt, and within, I guess, 1, 2, or 3 days, an announcement was made that Rabbi Judah Nadish would be advisor to General Eisenhower on Jewish affairs. I've always enjoyed that little story because it taught me a little bit about the accidents of history, and where you are and where you are at a given place in time may have a great deal to do with your career. I must say that Judah, in those several months, applied himself with a great deal of vigor and interest. He had very little staff, if any, if I remember. In fact, even Cy Rifkin, Judge Simon H. Rifkin, who's now a distinguished lawyer, a former federal jurist, came in. He too had very little staff when he first started. Essentially, I was his ears and eyes of what was going on in the camps in the country. So basically, I was his intelligence service for information. Later on, he built a larger staff. I also remember that he had an associate whose name I can't remember, but I believe was a lawyer as one of his first aides. I think his name was Hyman.
Yeah, Abe Hyman.
He may have been a rabbi. Was he a rabbi?
No,
No. I think he's a young lawyer thing.
Right.
And
he later closed that office.
Later closed that office.
Yeah, he was the last one.
After Philip Bernstein. You mean he remained through
Well, after Bernstein, there was somebody.
Well, then in other words,
yeah.
thing. Now, obviously, we worked closely together, both with Judah Natives and subsequently with Cy Rifkin.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
so in other words, what you're saying is that, to the best of your knowledge, you were the prime reason why Judah Natives was given that post.
well, I think if Judah Natives hadn't been a chaplain and hadn't been a Jew and hadn't been in Europe, he could have gotten the post without me, but he had the prerequisites for that particular post
Right.
at that time. But
Right.
I think that if I hadn't put that name in, Judah would not have been Eisenhower's advisor on Jewish affairs.
In other words, what you're saying is that had you selected someone else, then someone else
I
probably
think if I selected someone else that was a chaplain,
Yeah.
that was a Jew, I would assume he would have made it unless they had checked him out adversely.
Right.
I tell this story. I have absolutely nothing but respect for the effort that Judah Natives put into the job during his short period in Germany.
Mm-hmm. And you saw him.
I think it changed his life too. I would suspect it might have even had something to do with how much he was in demand for very important pulpits in the United States. On that, you'll have to ask Judah Natives.
Fun.
Now, with regards to Judge Rifkin, we'll get back to that unless you have anything specific you wanted to say before that. Did you have any professional contact with any other American Jewish chaplains?
Yes, I did meet several chaplains in those early days in Germany. The only one that I remember, other than Judah Natives, was Rabbi Klausner and Rabbi Max Browdy. I found Rabbi Klausner in the Munich area, and Rabbi Max Browdy at Heidelberg. I had contact with others who I do not remember. Shall I go on to describe a little bit my impressions of what was involved?
Definitely.
Well, one has to get this picture clear. The liberating forces, appalled with what they found of the extermination during the Holocaust, and appalled at what they found of the condition of the surviving Jews in the first days of the period of liberation. Jewish soldiers responded magnificently, feeling an absolute personal obligation to do everything within their power to serve the survivors, and certainly that went for chaplains as well. They obviously made all sorts of contacts, tried to bring additional supplies to them. I'm sure they violated many an Army rule and regulation to somehow find supplies to people to improve their diet, their clothing, and the like. So in that period, before really the entry of JDC.
And when did
into-
JDC, excuse me?
JDC tried to get into Germany from the very, very first day after the war. In fact, I was called back from the Middle East, and the difficulty, because of the post-war period of who they were going to let in other than the Army thing, it took probably, the war ended on May the 8th, 45. I probably was not in Germany until June the 26th, even though there was five
Functioning?
or six. I wasn't able to get in to set foot in Germany for 5 or 6 weeks after VE Day.
Mhm.
JDC had no, and we were constantly scrapping with the American Army to permit me to go in. And
Yeah.
so therefore, during that period of 5 weeks, whatever was done beyond the formal, whatever was done officially by the Army, of course,
Yeah.
whatever was done to improve upon the situation of refugees was really done by a lot of Jewish soldiers, and also some boys that had been in the Jewish British Brigade, in the British zone, and Haganah boys, there were some who got rid of their uniforms and kind of melted into the landscape of the refugees. And when you went in the British zone, you found the same thing with the British soldiers and the other. When I came in 5 weeks later,
Mhm.
I got an impression that everybody, any Jew that was in the armed services, was determined to do everything he could, big or little. And the same goes for the chaplains. Now, I don't say this disparagingly, but one also has to remember that some chaplains, I don't know how many, saw that their words were especially important. And as they wrote to the United States, they were self-conscious about it as chaplains. Much of it valid, because recipients of letters from chaplains, for that matter from Jewish soldiers, had a great impact on an impatience to get in. It wasn't always fully understood. For example, JDC was severely criticized in those first weeks after the war, both for the refugees that were there,
Mhm.
and outside, and the Jewish soldiers, because they just couldn't understand why the minute that war was over, JDC personnel wasn't really in the camps and their flies were there, not realizing that it's one thing to be able to, let's say, liberate 6 towels and half dozen pieces of clothing for someone. It's the second thing to persuade the U.S. Army to get an official organization in.
Well,
they go ahead.
Well, I think the criticism,
Yes.
if I know it, if I understand it properly, is that several things. Why, for instance, did the JDC not prepare in advance? Why wasn't this decision about letting JDC in immediately hammered away, not at the end of the war, but before the end of the war?
Well, let me only say this
Yeah,
to you.
and I'm not
Yeah.
trying to. I'm just
No,
trying
I
to.
understand. No, I'm trying to reconstruct it too, in all
Yeah.
fairness to history. First of all, I think JDC foresaw the end of the war, and
Okay.
foresaw it clearly. For example, the course that they had taught at Columbia University, they selected about 30 of us around the country. Preparing us to go overseas was a very, very serious effort. Very serious
When was
effort.
this, by the way?
This was in probably October, November 43. So certainly...
Did they tell you that
right.
you'll probably expect to see remnants?
Oh
of
yeah, we
European
were
Jewry?
very well trained. If anything, we were overtrained in a sense, and everything that
You weren't
they could know.
surprised. The reason I ask is because the chaplains complained about their own
Look,
training that
can
they
I-
didn't get.
No,
that
let
way.
me tell you, JDC went through a serious effort. In addition to that, I had an uneffort thing. JDC took one solid month, morning, afternoon, and night, and evening, and they brought together all the knowledgeable people and the knowledgeable literature of what you're likely to find. There were faculty professors from Columbia University. There were leading European Jews that knew the condition. Rabbi Alkali from Yugoslavia would talk about it, etc. These men, after all, kept in as best touch as they could during the war through underground methods and what have you, so that everything that was known, that's reasonably could be known, was we were stuffed like geese to know everything, to be ready to go out there to do our job. Then came Then came the business of then when then UNRWA said at first that no private refugee organization could be in Italy on their own. They were going to coordinate it. Therefore, you had to assign your refugee mission people to UNRWA, whatever organization. JDC couldn't expect to go in as they did in post-World War I, just as a JDC team. They had to give people over to UNRWA.
Now, when was this decision made?
This decision was made by UNRWA, I suspect, let me guess, a year before the end of the war.
Okay.
Now, JDC met that decision. That wasn't the way they would have liked to have had it done.
Mm-hmm.
They met it by saying, all right, we will give 30 people to UNRWA. Remember that I think Governor Lehman was then on the board of JDC before he took over as the Director General of UNRWA.
Right.
And this is the way it had to be done. So they said to me, well, you'll be the head of the UNRWA team that we send. We'll send 30 people over. Wherever they go, you'll be kind of their coordinator. It's a plan that never worked, because to give you an example how it didn't work, when I packed my bag, I thought I was being sent first to Yugoslavia, in which I had heavy boots and a delousing comb, among other things, in my trunk. The trunk met me in Cairo after being shipped in 4 different countries, because each time I told I was going to be someplace else, I served notice to the forwarding agent and had to be shipped. I met it on one lovely, warm Saturday afternoon in Shepherd's Hotel in Cairo. And this little story is only indicative that planning couldn't be that precise. The Army didn't know where, and when. Now, once we got in, we moved very fast. After all, when I arrived in Germany, I went to the British Army of the Rhine headquarters. Never knew where it was before, but I wasted no time finding out. I said, give me a car, take me to Bergen-Belsen. They said, there is no Bergen-Belsen. It says the British Army of the Rhine top leadership. What do you mean there's no Bergen-Belsen? There's thousands of well, there isn't. I said, well, I don't drive. I want a driver in a car. Let me go there. If I don't go there, I'll go and find. So I got a nice British soldier, and we went to the British Army of the Rhine. We went up to Bergen-Belsen, and sure enough, there was a Bergen-Belsen with, I think, 14,000 people, 6,500 behind barbed wire, still being buried in mass graves at 90. I was with the first kid as he pled with a commander in Yiddish, which I translated commander, that his parent who had just died, he permitted a single grave. What had happened apparently is they burned down some of the most infamous part of infested Belsen, and this was maybe a kilometer away. Mm. Now this is far from your chaplain's story.
No, but that's fine.
And another interesting story about German deniability is that when I went, I usually traveled I moved around a good deal in those first weeks. To give you an idea of the eagerness, when I got to Belsen that night, the commander of the camp said, yes, you'll stay in my house. So you'll have dinner here tonight. I must have arrived late Friday evening. And I said, oh, I can't do that. I have to go out and work. He said, no, everybody feels fine. They've been liberated. You'll see them you'll see them after breakfast in the morning. No, I didn't wait for breakfast. 6 a.m. I was out in the Bergen-Belsen camp. I was in an American Army uniform with an AJC insignia, and people were pulling me apart in 1,000 different directions. But to show you the speed with which JDC, who after all had a very rich past experience, made up for the fact that, one, we got in late, which was really not JDC's fault at all. The American Army, for some reason, some bureaucratic business of how one admits us in, they didn't know exactly how they were going to organize the refugee work, I guess, but we bowled our way in. We probably had telephone calls between Paris and Frankfurt every day or two trying to get me in. Well, once I got in, Dr. Schwartz came to visit me within, I don't know, a couple of weeks. I was in Paris, and we made a decision that I should have 60 people right away. A wire was sent to the United States, and 60 people came in promptly, were shipped over to assist. I also have a lovely story about...
Let me just